is Ervad Firdosh Bulsara. Everybody knows him. He's the past president of OZCF. Firdosh is going to talk to you about a subject which is very what you call not known in the community, which is Vendidad. Okay, everybody has heard of what Vendidad. A lot of people don't know what Vendidad is even. So he's going to talk about that. Come on in, Firdosh.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can I move this a bit?
Welcome.
Thank you. Can you all hear me now? There's a lot of echo up here. Yes, as Ervad Zorolia said, or Ervad Kovat said, it is a very, very distinctively difficult document, which is Vendidad. So, and it's going to take a little bit of time. So I'm glad that we have some time before we wrap this up, because I'll get you interested into this document, as I call it. First and foremost, I've been wanting to say this from the time I stepped in today. And that is that it really saddens me personally to see the interest in such religious talks in our community. I mean, I am 60 plus, and so is the majority of you up here. And majority, I said, Katie. So there are some exceptions to the rule. It would bode well for Zoroastrianism. It really would bode well for Zoroastrianism if this interest in the religion at a simplistic level, because we all talk about all this fancy schmancy stuff and very high level discussions on yazatas and all sorts of things. It doesn't interest the younger crowds because they get confused. They really do not have a direction or a proper direction. Not everyone in this community is a scholar. There are some, we can rely on them, but at the same time, you have to bring the kids up in a level where they become familiar, and not only familiar, ladies and gentlemen, they become interested to partake in such events. And that's what I would like to see. So, having said that, I'm also going to kind of retrace my steps back, and with my newly gained little knowledge is always dangerous, remember that, and the principles of Vendidad, I'm going to drive such evil thoughts out of my mind, that you can train your children and definitely be prosperous as Zoroastrianism continues into the next century and the next after that. At the outset, folks, I have to also mention, and this is going to be a little bit political, is that after my talk at the OZCF, I've had to set some things right. The title of the talk, which has created some chatter on internet, and that is, it is not Zarathustra's manual. That is what I've been told. Zarathustra's manual couldn't have been happening because Vendidad was written hundreds of years later, or perhaps earlier, because scholars also never agree with one another. Remember that. So I spend my time reading, I spend my time understanding, but I am absolutely not a scholar. I do not intend to be one. I do not want to be questioned because I cannot answer them intelligently, so to speak. And the authority, whoever said about what is to be said in the Vendidad, there have been certain gaps that I think we can fill as we go along. So when I was questioned, or rather informed, that Zarathustra was not involved in the Vendidad, I then started asking some serious questions. I went to a couple of learned people, and I'll name them as well. So, and see how different these things happen, folks, before we even get into the subject. Soli Dastur is a very prominent learned person in Florida who does a lot for Zoroastrianism. So he says that Zarathustra had nothing, mark it, nothing to do with Vendidad. Zarathustra and Ahura Mazda's dialogue in the Vendidad, and you have to understand when I'm saying Zarathustra's dialogue, because the Vendidad, which is a document of 22 chapters, is all dialogue between Ahura Mazda and Zarathustra. But we'll get into that to explain what this dialogue is. The Zarathustra and Ahura Mazda's dialogue in the Vendidad, these are made up by authors around 200 to 300 BC, or even later, which means 100 BC, to give authentication to what they have described in the Vendidad. So when a scholar of that time wanted to write something, they were going to justify it by inserting items that may or may not have been perceived as the correct items. So in my talk, when I mention dialogue between Zarathustra and Ahura Mazda, there are of course going to be reservations. Let's look a little bit away from the Vendidad into the Gathas. In the Gathas, yes, Zarathustra asks Ahura Mazda many questions. However, as Ervad Dastur informs me, Ahura Mazda is not perceived to have answered any of them. In fact, Ahura Mazda never answered Zarathustra. Zarathustra is using his own good mind, the Bahu Mana, to answer himself the questions that he's asking. And he, through the power of Asha, is figuring out the answers to his own question. It was only later that in the scriptures, like the Yasts and the Vendidad, that used these questions and answers between and made them to be looked like dialogue between Zarathustra and Ahura Mazda for their own views. These are the scriptures that were written at that time. Okay? Now, let's look at the other side. And this is another very learned person who I've respected all my life, Ervad Panthaki. And Gustad Panthaki writes to me, he says, Vendidad is the most controversial, much debated, hardly read, and grossly misunderstood Nask or document. Interesting, isn't it? One of the very profound scholars, Firdosh Masani, defends the authorship of Vendidad as Zarathustra. So there is a direct contradiction here. Okay, I am not going to be able to answer any questions raised on this because I'm no authority. So hold your questions on that. Okay, and when he says about Firdosh Masani, he actually quotes, Ervad Panthaki quotes to me and says, go back and look at page 1 or 11 or 13 of Dermestether's comments. Also, Dastur Darab Sanjana comments in the introduction of the Pahlavi version of Vendidad. The book is called Zoroastrianism, Ancient and Modern. So one says that Zarathustra has nothing, market, nothing to do with it. The other says the authorship is Zarathustra's. So scholars can disagree, of course, and we, the laity, including me, have to believe both sides. The best thing to do is what my predecessors have said: use the Vahumana and guide yourself. Because, and I'm going to refer something else which is more interesting. On the other hand, Professor Malandra defends the assumption of Vendidad author as a Magi, the old ancient priests of those times. Ervad Gustad Panthaki also confirms that there is nothing in the entire text which leads to Magian authorship. So again, we have these crisscross messages. And this last line that I referred to, which says nothing in the entire text which leads to Magian authorship, this is according to the 2005 Fezana Journal on page 85. If you guys stock your Fezana journals, go back and have a look at it. So, there is another email that I received, which I want to clarify. Vendidad rules and restrictions were imposed upon the Persian people during Achaemenid period of Cyrus, Darius, etc., etc. The philosophy of Zarathustra was hijacked by the Assyrian priesthood, Magi, of Sargon I and Sargon II. This was thousands of years after Zarathustra. So, the writer of the email says that he cannot equate how me, Firdosh, is going to join the philosophy of the prophet with the restrictive rules of Vendidad. So that all said, let's do this. Once again, in Ervad Gustad Panthaki's words, before I start my talk, I'm going to say something that might be of interest to you. I have to confess that I may not fully comprehend or understand religious texts. And that includes the Vendidad. I, Firdosh Bulsara, am a very, very inquisitive person when it comes to religious texts. And I must follow René Descartes. Descartes. It's an adage that he has done, sorry. It says and please guide me in this pronunciation because it's Latin probably, de omnibus dubitendum. You know what that means? Everything is to be doubted. So we are going to join me in this very controversial track that we go along and enjoy the ride. So when I agreed with our NAMC president, Ervad Zarolia, and he asked me, what are you going to speak on? Guess what subject I decided to speak on? The most controversial, the most debated, the grossly misunderstood Vendidad. Vendidad, what is it? It is a document, that's for sure. It's a very lengthy document. It explains itself. It's the law to turn away evil. And Kushal, please guide me. What is it? Vidaivadat. Vidaivadat in the, is that the Avesta?
Yes.
To say that this is a complex document, ladies and gentlemen, would be an understatement. Entirely an understatement. To even suggest that this is a prayer book, because Vendidad is being prayed regularly, is, for me personally, as a laity, is a very difficult thing to digest. Simply because almost all of this document that we refer to as the Vendidad is a dialogue. It is a dialogue. More so, a prophet seeking direction from Ahura Mazda. Zarathustra is seeking direction from Ahura Mazda, whom Zarathustra refers throughout this book in different titles as a different person. In some places, he refers to Ahura Mazda as, "O righteous creator of the corporeal," which means of the physical and the material world. And other places, he refers to Ahura Mazda as the supreme mentality. And he's got these different titles that he goes across when you go read the Vendidad. So, in the Gathas, which are the only scriptures attributed directly to Zarathustra, he asks a number of pointed questions as I asked you. And according to some scholars, Ahura Mazda responds, and according to others, the other school of thinking is that Zarathustra, using his own power of Asha, figures out the righteous answer to his own questions. This mode of dialogue has then been taken into account as time moved on, and hundreds of years later, it has been revised, and it has been an evolving document as we go along. Vendidad, experts have placed as a document that began in the middle of the first millennium BC, which is 650 to 400 BC. This was indeed the period, and it was a very fruitful period that saw the rise of many successive empires, such as the Neo-Assyrian Empire, followed by the Achaemenids. In South Asia, the Vedic civilization was growing. In Central America, the Mayan civilization had taken root. The religions, the fundamental religions of Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, and Buddhism came about. That was the era. It was a bright era. More interesting is the fact that it saw a rise of literature and learning. With prospering empires and civilizations, by the end of the first millennium, the world population was established and estimated as 350 million. Vendidad evolved over the years with changes in certain laws. It is a book of laws. For example, the timing, and I got really I was confused. In the Vendidad, at one of the desks, it mentions 7 continents, spreading over 7 continents. And I took it as the 7 existing continents. And then it kind of triggered that, how can that be? Because the Americas was only discovered a few hundred years ago. And so on and so on. And this timing doesn't sit right. And so when I questioned this, it came to light. And the 7 continents that are mentioned is Haftakeshwar Zameen, 7 places on the earth. But it doesn't refer to the current 7 continents. When we pray the African, in the debache of the African, in the beginning, the introduction of the African, we say Hama Pravasha Shoan, Haftakeshwar Zameen, Arzahe, Savahe, Fradadash, Vidadash, Vovru Zares, Kanarasabak. Vovru Baresh Kanarasabak. This, when translated by Kotwal and by Boyd as may all frowashes of the righteous in the seven continents of the earth. Example, Arzahe on the east, Savahe on the west, Fravadesh on the southeast, Vidadash on the southwest, Vovru Baresht on the northwest, Vovru Zaresht on the northeast, and the shining Kanarasban in the center. So that is the seven continents that were referred in the Vendidad at that time. Actually, the book of Vendidad is also a very hard read. Trust me, it is. Not because of its spirituality or its philosophy, but because of its timing. Its timing. Everything written as a word in Vendidad is related to surroundings, to the environment, availability of facilities at that time, and living conditions of that time. The laws that were decided and written to be followed according to Vendidad will very, very seldom apply in this 21st century of ours. After all, when I'm talking about Vendidad and when I talked about the middle of the first millennia BC and all of that, we are talking of a difference of 2,500 to 3,000 years. The Vendidad is 22 chapters. It is a very lengthy but an often repetitive book. The duality of nature is evident right from the very start, as the book begins with Marot ahure mazda spitamai Zarathushtrai, azem dadam spitama Zarathustra, asharamo daitim, noit kudat shaitim, yaidi ziazem noit daityam spitama Zarathustra. And it goes on. Ahura Mazda speaks unto Zarathustra, unto Spitama Zarathustra, saying, Ahura Mazda says this to Zarathustra, I have made every land dear to its people, even though it had no charm whatsoever in it, this land that Ahura Mazda created. Had I not made every land dear to its people, even though it had no charm whatsoever in it, then the whole living world would have invaded the Aryana Vaja. Here we go again, Aryana Vaja. It is ancient Iran, the land of the ancient Iran. The Ahura Mazda continues to speak to Zarathustra. He says, Poirim Asangamcha, Shoitranamcha, Vais, and it goes on. The first of the good lands and the countries which I, Ahura Mazda, created was the Aryana Vaja. But the Vanguhi Daitya, Aryana Vaja by the Vanguhi Daitya, which is a river. Thereupon came Angra Mainyu. Again, as I said, it starts off with the nature of duality, the good and the evil. Angra Mainyu, who is all death, and he counter-created the serpent in the river, and, guys, you guys are all in Canada, and Angara Mainyu created winter, a work of the Deva. So in those days, to survive a winter was a very, very tough thing. Am I being interesting or not?
Yes, yes, yes.
I am. I'm just hoping you guys are awake. So when we begin to recite the Vendidad, we are acknowledging the fact that first, Ahura Mazda would create a land of such kind that its dwellers might like it. And there could be nothing more delightful, of course not. Then, who is all death, the Angara Mainyu, would bring against it a counter creation. And thus begins the document that will continue to battle the force of evil. The very first paragraph also introduces us to Aryanem Veja or Iran Vej as the holy land of Zarathustra. Zarathustra was born and founded his religion here. Now, Bundahishan has this information as well, but the scholars also differ as to the timing of the Zarathustra's birth. So we will not delve into that at the moment. The Vendidad is an ancient collection of Zoroastrian myths, prayers, and religious observances. One has to understand and must realize that this collection has almost every reference that to the surroundings and the natural environment and the living conditions of that time. I personally would have to research more to derive the right period as to which millennium BCE the Vendidad got its real roots. Some say that it was 1,000 years later than Zarathustra. I'm not sure about that. The book of Vendidad is intended to defend against sources of infection, interesting, and evil. Particular attention is given to the disposal of the dead. It's elaborately given, actually, the disposal of the dead and other dead matter, which is nasu, to keep diseases from spreading, as well as avoid polluting the earth, water, environment, etc. What was really interesting when I was going through this was to discover paragraphs 40, 41, and 42 of chapter 3. The paragraphs in the Vendidad are referred to as Fargaran. To give you a reference leading to the following prayer, Zarathustra is seeking guidance from Ahura Mazda on atonement for polluters who bury their dead. Ooh, this is a devil's advocate here. We are all talking about the Dakwa in Mumbai and what to do, but here it's in writing. Atonement for polluters who bury the dead. There is also reference to Mazdiyasni and non-Mazdiyasni performing such actions. Remember this, Mazdiyasnis and non-Mazdiyasnis, because we are going to refer to that a little later as well. In answer to Zarathustra's question, Ahura Mazda replies, Ke aiva yezi angaha ashtuto va aivisvano. This whole paragraph, when Zarathustra is asking these questions as to what is happening, then Ahura Mazda says, when is it so? It is so if the sinner praises or is putting faith in the religion of Mazda, or one who has been taught in it. But if he is neither praising nor putting faith in the religion of Mazda, nor one who has been taught in it, that he is taught to be firm in adherence to his duties of the Mazdiyasni religion, and if he makes confession of the religion of Mazda and resolves never to commit again such forbidden deeds like burying the dead. So Ahura Mazda is actually telling Zarathustra that you have to ensure that the person is following the religion of Mazda, and if that person is not following the religion of Mazda, feel free to teach him or her and get him involved in the religion and get the faith going. That's how I interpret it. Scholars may be different. And then he continues to say, Spaitya si spitama, O spitama Zarathustra, Daina Mazdiyashni Narash Ashtavarnahe Bandem. The religion of Mazda indeed takes away bonds from men firm in adherence to the duties of the religion. Spaityate Ashkava Ashavai, I can't read in English the Avastha, I have to find it in Gujarati. He says, takes away from him who makes confession of his sins, takes away the breach of trust, takes away the sin of murdering, takes away the sin of burying a corpse. It takes away the sin of deeds for which there is no atonement. It takes away the worst sin of usury. Lending money at exorbitant interest rates. They had interest rates 3,000 years ago? Come on. Maybe it could be true, but I do not know in which currency they would be paying. It takes away the sin that may be sinned. So, you see, there is this distinct line of laws being laid out as we move along the document. In the same way, the religion of Mazda cleanses the faithful from every evil thought, word, and deed. As a swift rushing mighty wind wells and clears away the space between the earth and the sky, all around. O Spitama Zarathustra, good, honestly performed work done here. The good mastery religion fully spread cuts off punishment. The above two paragraphs that I just mentioned, they have somewhat of a tendency and philosophy where Jesus Christ is supposed to forgive the sins of the followers on their confessions. So maybe this period of writing was a little different. Who knows? Zarathustra's philosophy has always been that everyone is responsible for his or her deeds and has to confront their own consequences. Here, my understanding, reading in the spirit of the scripture, is that Ahura Mazda is prompting Zarathustra to spread the good religion. This is not the only place in the Vendidad that we encounter the instructions of Ahura Mazda to Zarathustra to continue spreading the good religion. There are quite a few other instances where the spread the religion, spread the good word, spread the faith. It's there. So, how do we interpret that? Does that open up this huge controversy of the capital C, the conversion that is going on right now? Anyway, not a subject to tackle at this time either. The Vendidad is an extremely elaborate document on the disposal of the dead. I mentioned that. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 are totally dedicated to the dogma against destroying the sanctity of the earth with the practice of burial. Periods of time the earth remains polluted when a dead body is placed into it, and of course the relevant penalties to be imposed. So these laws are again spelled out very distinctively. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let me draw your attention to the fact that we are talking about a specific period in time of history when these laws were introduced. However, relevance to it in today's day and age is surprisingly close. I have to believe that the scripture of these chapters in the Vendidad are actually acutely relevant to the environment today as they were centuries ago. And I'll give you an example. In chapter 5, verses 16 through 21, where the dialogue exchange is something like this. Zarathustra says to Ahura Mazda, that thou, Ahura Mazda, let fall the water from seas and take them down to the corpses. That thou, Ahura Mazda, take them down to the dakmas. That thou, Ahura Mazda, take them down to the unclean remains. That thou, Ahura Mazda, take them down to the bones. That thou, Ahura Mazda, then make them flow back unseen, and that thou, Ahura Mazda, make them flow back to the sea. See what I mean by being repetitive? It is a very repetitive document too. And Ahura Mazda responses to this, saying, it is even so as thou hast said, O righteous Zarathustra. The waters stand there boiling up in the heart of the sea. And the sea is referred to Poetica. And when cleansed, there they run back from the sea, again referring to Poetica, to the sea, Voru Kasha. towards the well-watered trees, whereupon grow the seed of my plants of every kind, by the hundreds, by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands. Those plants I, Ahura Mazda, rain down upon the earth to bring food to the faithful and fodder to the beneficent cow. Bring food to my people that they may live on it, and fodder to the beneficent cow. So what it does show us, and most of you know that Africa has been my specialty in travel-wise, and one of the things that we always discuss and are very, very proud of getting involved in is the fragile ecosystem of this earth. And go back 2,500 years ago, and this book of Vendidad is actually talking about the beauty of the ecosystem and how cleanly it is maintained. The acute science and discovery of that age, balancing the environment with actions that would keep pollution and polluters away, and chapters relating to women and the mense or the women's period, as well as house purifications. All of this is explained in virtual detail that is unbelievable for those times. There is further evidence. Paragraphs 21 and 22, same chapter. Imat vanguho imat sario yatatum arezavo, and it goes on. This cleansing and purification is the best. It is the fairest of all things, and as thou said, O pure Zarathustra, with these words the holy Ahura Mazda pleased the righteous Zarathustra that he will balance the ecosystem of the earth. Datare ashunku aisti maisyo vangu srayo aitem daitem im vayudim. Zarathushtra upairi aish sravish manascha vangascha saryanascha. Purity from birth for man is best. This purity, O Zarathustra, is greater, better, and more beautiful, higher than the sacred texts in greatness, goodness, and fairness. The Vendidad is also a very elaborate document when it comes to funeral rituals. This is the interesting part, guys. And purification. The laws are stringent. The use of bull's urine was predominant in the purification and cleansing during the following of after the funeral. In chapter 8, paragraphs 11, 12, and 13, the laws are offered as follows. Afterwards, the corpse bearers, once they have taken the corpse into the dogma and finished off the funeral, after that, the corpse bearers shall sit down 3 paces from the dead, and the holy Ratu, or the priest, performing priest, that directs the funeral, shall proclaim to the worshippers of Mazda that, worshippers of Mazda, let the urine be brought here, wherewith the corpse bearers shall wash their hair and their bodies. Continues on, Datare Ashun Kyao. Zarathustra asks Ahura Mazda, O maker of the material world. See, the title has been different. Thou Holy One, where is the urine wherewith the corpse bearers shall wash their hair and their bodies? Is it of the sheep, or of the oxen, or of a man, or of a woman? And Ahura Mazda answers, it is of sheep or of oxen, not of man or woman, except a man or a woman who has married the next of kin. These shall therefore procure the urine, wherewith the corpse bearers shall wash their hair and their bodies. The reasoning here mentioned was that the next of kin marriage, or quiet Quiet, I asked you this the other day too. Quiet is dreaded by the Ahriman, who is the dominant evil of death. So, on further references that we looked at, the next of kin marriage is translated as Kayatva is refuted as by many scholars, and Dr. Dastuji Sanjana has given 2 lectures referring them conclusively, which are published as a book. Using their urine for cleansing is really bad logic. Folks, even the role of a dog, and most of you are from Asia, India, Pakistan, all these areas. So you know that when we have the funerals, there is always going to be a dog. And in the Vendidad, even the role of a dog in the funeral ritual is explicitly described, with walking the dog in line with the length of the body and also alongside the body. In fact, almost 3/4 of chapter 13, 3/4 of it, is dedicated to dogs and laws laid out for their care. So let's examine the laws laid out for creating. I'm moving away from the dead now into the living. And let's examine the fires, all the different fires. The observation is that at the time that the Vendidad was written, there was a practice of carrying fires used in different trades. The Vendidad defines a table of types of fires to be used in consecrating the Atashbirams and so on and so forth, to be taken from the rightful place and the number of times to be purified before using the same fire in the Atashbiram. Now, Ervad Pantaki says that he has never found any reference to consecration in the Vendidad. And so we had this exchange of talk. And it's not the consecration practice that is in the Vendidad, it is the collections of the fires that at that time was described in some sort of a detail. And the 16 fires that make up the Atashbiram fire, according to Dr. J.J. Modi in his book, Zoroastrian Ceremonies, mentions these 16 fires for Atashbiram consecration, which also appear in the Vendidad. The ritual formulated for the consecration of the sacred fire seems to have been developed from the certain passages of the 8th chapter of the Vendidad, where it is enjoined that the fires used for different purposes and by different tradesmen may be carried from their places of use and businesses and enshrined in a dadga. Here is something that you need to understand. Dadga. The Avestan translation is Daityo Gatu, which means proper place. We refer to our places as Dadga. They are the proper places, indeed. Yeah. The list of fires are in a book. The fires used in burning of a corpse, in burning filth, in burning dirt, the fire used by a potter, a glass blower, a coppersmith, a goldsmith, a silversmith, an ironsmith, steelsmith, a baker, a furnace worker, a tinsmith, a shepherd, a military man or soldier, a neighbor. There is also fires that are collected, purifying and consecrating, and that includes fire collected from natural lighting. Interesting. Let us find out what Zarathustra is asking in terms of how he wants to free the earth from evil. How shall I free the world from Tadruj, from the evil doer, Angaramaini? This is Zarathustra's question. How shall I drive away direct defilement? How indirect defilement? How shall I drive the Nasu from the house of worshippers of Mazda. How shall I cleanse the faithful man? How shall I cleanse the faithful woman? Atmarot Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda answers, and he says, invoke, O Zarathustra, the good religion of Mazda. Invoke, O Zarathustra, thou, as you see them not, the Amesha Spentas who rule over the 7 continents. We talked about the 7 continents before. This is where I got a bit confused. The 7 continents of the earth. And in that respect, the Ahura Mazda questions again and says, invoke Zarathustra, the sovereign heaven, the boundless time and vayu, whose action is pure. Invoke Zarathustra, the powerful wind made by Mazda, and Spenta our mighty, the fair daughter of Ahura Mazda. Again he says, invoke, O Zarathustra, my Fravashi, who am Ahura Mazda, the greatest, the best, the fairest of all beings, the most solid, the most intelligent, the best shapen, the highest in holiness, and whose soul is holy mantra spenta, the good word. Invoke, O Zarathustra, this creation of mine, who am Ahura Mazda. As you can see, the actions and behavioral patterns, it is clearly that of following righteousness. And during the time that the Angaramanyu is victorious, particularly at the time of death, we always say that for the first 3 days, the evil has superpowers over the good, because that evil has entered and created the death in that area. The defined laws remain, create a firewall of good spirits, providing the strength, mental and physical, to battle the evil. There's also this Vendidad that gives you the pattern in which to maintain your hair and your nails. The Vendidad says that anything that has been separated from the body of a man or a woman is considered dead matter and is accordingly supposed to fall into the possession of the demon and to become the abode of death and uncleanliness. Keep in mind that we are talking about the middle of the first millennia BC, that is some 2,500 years ago. The Mazda worshippers were given to understand that hair and nails, as soon as they are cut off, are at once the property of Arivan. Hence, the law was for them to deposit the waste into the earth inside consecrated circles. Therefore, thou, O Zarathustra, this is the law, whenever here below thou shalt comb thy hair, or shave it off, or pare off thy nails, thou shalt take them away 10 paces from the faithful, 20 paces from the fire, 30 paces from the water, 50 paces from the consecrated bundles of punishment. Then thou shalt dig a hole, disti deep, which means 10 fingers deep, if the earth is hard, which is, they're talking about the winter, and vitashti, 12 fingers, if the earth is soft. Thou shalt take the hair down there, and thou shalt say aloud these victorious words. Ataya Shabazda Urvara Bakshasht. For him, as a reward, Mazda made the plants grow up. So you're actually creating soil, which is more in today's term, what we refer to as compost matter. Thereupon thou shalt draw 3 furrows with a knife of metal round the hole, or 6 furrows, or 9. Thou shalt chant the Ahunavarya, which is Yathavarios, 3 times, 6 times, or 9 times. So when I read all this, I was kind of intrigued as to how the other communities and other nationalities and all of those people would do with their hairs and nails. And I found something that was quite interesting, and as to what the rest of the world would do. The author suggests that he finds it in, if not the origin and explanation, at least the oldest record of worldwide superstitions. And this is from the book actually. The Estonians on the shores of the Baltic take the utmost care not to drop a pairing of their nails on the ground, lest the devil should pick them up to make a visor for his cap, because the nails are in a curve, so they can make a visor out of it.
Very small, then.
Very small head. Yes. Which will give them full power to injure men unless the sign of the cross has been made upon over them. The Gauchos, which is in South America, and the Chilean Pampas, which are Central America, Mexico, fear to throw their hair to the wind, but deposit it in holes dug in a wall. In Lej, good people are advised not to throw away their hair, nor to leave it in the teeth of the comb, lest a witch take hold of it and cast a spell over them. So we are not the only ones, folks. Join the club. I guess my time, how much is the time? My time is running out, so I will close. But interesting enough, what we really need to know is that even this document has a wonderful closing. And we do that every day. We close it every day with our custom prayers. And it starts off with Kevare Tremtva, Jatva Poishenga Yoyanti Chitramoi Dasham Miskebna Mazda. Who is the victorious who will protect my teachings, says Zarathustra. Make it clear that I am the guide for both worlds, Ahura Mazda. May Sarosha come with Vahu Mano and help whomsoever thou pleasest, O Mazda. So when you say your Kemna Mazda, you are actually invoking a lot of thought here. And you go Payatana Tavishantat Pairimastas Charmetischa Spentascha. Keep us from our haters, O Mazda and Almighty Spenta. Perish, O fiendish Druj, perish, O brood of the fine, perish, O world of the fine, perish away. Nasideva Druj, Nasideva Chitra, Nasideva Prakarascha. Perish away to the regions of the north, never more to give unto death the living world of righteousness. And there endeth my little talk. Thank you so much.